Hi everyone, hope you're doing well. So alongside Star Wars, my other big interest is Marvel Comics and specifically the X-Men. I grew up watching the 90s cartoon and quickly moved on to the comics and have been reading them ever since. My favourite run is the Jim Lee 90s era and I especially love all the villains introduced around that time. With one of my all-time favourites being Omega Red. So I purchased this 3D print online from Wicked 3D and I've printed it at roughly 1/5 scale. All the pieces have been sanded and some pieces have been glued together, and I've also gone in and put primer on a few of the pieces. So I have primed in light grey the main body and arms. The reason for that being his skin is quite white, so it'll be a lot easier to paint that. I haven't glued the head on, that's still a separate piece, but the body to the waist has been glued. I have glued in place quite a few of the tentacles, but left a couple off because that'll be easier for the final assembly. I haven't spray painted them yet. I will primer those in Leadbelcher silver. And then finally we have the logo. I've left that piece off the front. That connects over the top here, and I have sprayed the base gold already just because I had some Retributor armor spray already, and I'm going to do pretty much the whole base gold. So let's get on with the painting. So as he's called Omega Red, it seems the obvious way is to start with red paint. He's mostly red and silver as predominantly the colours of his armour and clothing. So what I'm going to do is a couple of different shades of red across the model just to mix things up. So there's a couple of different sort of textures around the model. So for this kind of dimpled texture, which you have around the upper body, lower, and a bit on the arms in between the shoulder pads, I'm going to do that the darkest red I got, which happens to be corn red. So let's start with a bit of thin down corn red. Using a black wash, some Nuln Oil, I'm just going to darken down those red parts just a little bit more, just to fill in the recesses. With the red now darkened down, I'm going to do a very light dry brush of Mephiston red across the top areas just to bring out some of the detail. So after that dry brush, you can see that the details, particularly around the folds, have really come out now. So now it's a case of doing the rest of the red and pretty much following the same steps but just in different tones. So now I'm going to do the rest in starting with a lighter Mephiston red. And I'm now going to use a red wash, which in this case is Carroburg Crimson, to go over all the lighter red colour. And it's just a complete all over wash. And now a dry brush of Wild Rider red all over that darkened down red we've already done. And now I'm going to use a light orange, in this case Troll Slayer orange, just to go over the middle part here again as a dry brush, just to give it a bit more colour. Okay, that is all the red done on all the pieces. And I think now we're going to move on to painting in some of the silver. A lot of his armour is silver, and I'm going to use some Leadbelcher silver and just thin it down and start putting it on. Leadbelcher is now all complete, and as everyone knows, you cannot use Leadbelcher without then covering it over with Nuln Oil. It's just the law. All over coat. And after the Nuln Oil has dried, it's just a case of going over all the silver with a dry brush of a lighter silver. In this case I'm using Runefang Steel, but basically any silver that's lighter than your starting silver is how you want to go. And with the silver all finished up, the highlights across the model are done. We're starting to get somewhere. I'm just going to go in now and do some of the straps on the casings down the side there just to add a bit of colour. So I'm just going to do those in brown, so starting with a medium sort of Mornfrang brown, then a wash of Agric Earthshade, and then a couple of highlights with a lighter colour brown, in this case Parasite brown. And there we are with the leather all finished. Okay, so I think that's the main body pretty much done now. So I'm going to turn to the head next. Now before I start layering in the white for the skin, I'm going to actually go in and do the details around the mouth and the gums. And I'm going to be using Screamer Pink for that, which is just a dark kind of pink really. And I've also just thrown a shade of Reikland Flesh Shade over the mouth and the gums there. Alright, and now let's start doing the skin. So I'm using Corax White, and we're just going to go around the whole model where needed. Now what I want to do is give the white skin a slight blue hue. So what I've got here is Drakenhof Nightshade. So it's a blue wash, and I've really watered it down because this wash is particularly dark. But I think I've got it to a fairly light consistency. So again, now it's just a case of putting this all over the white of the skin. With that blue dry, the skin has a nice sort of blue tint to it now. But I'm just going to go back over in parts where the blue stained a little bit too dark there by going over with white again in a dry brush. And with the skin all tidied up, I'm now going to glue the arms onto the body as they're completely finished. Okay, arms are now on, and I'm going to now turn to the tentacles or coils, whatever you want to call them. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn back to my favourite Nuln Oil shade. I'm just going to go in and go around the recesses of each one. So I'm not going to do an all over wash because I want to keep the outsides fairly normal in colour. What am I trying to say? I want to keep them fairly bright, and I'm going to go over them with a brighter silver anyway. So I'm just, as I say, just going to go in, do the recesses between each one just to give it a little bit of definition. With the wash all on, I'm now going to do a fairly heavy dry brush of that lighter silver. In this case, I'm using Runefang steel. Now those coils are all nicely shined up, it's a case of gluing them to the body. Now this is going to require a little bit of jiggery pokery because they attach into the back, they spiral all around his arms, come around the front, but of course they've also got to be connected at the front of his wrists. So you need to sort of plan what you're doing ahead of time here. As I say, I've glued as much as I possibly can. I've left 2 pieces spare on each arm, and then I'm going to glue them in here, and then glue the back on, and then glue in the last piece together. Hopefully it'll all connect. We'll see. Okay, there's the first one on, and just to show you that elastic bands really are your friend when you're trying to keep pieces held together. You can see how I've hooked all these up. So hopefully I'll give this a few hours and that should all dry nicely in place. When it comes to bases, I tend to think the most simplistic way is the best, unless it's an environmental base. I don't want to take away from the actual model. So for this one, all I'm going to do is go over the gold in a wash of Reikland Flesh Shade, which will give it a nice kind of red golden look. And then I'm going to go dry brush over the stained gold with a combination of Glorious Gold, Liberator, and then a dry brush of Runefang Steel over the top of it. And after all that dry brushing, this is what you're left with. And also you're left with a lot of paint all over your fingers as well, if you're a messy painter like I am. I've also just finished painting the logo, which goes on the front of the base there. I was in Lidl last night, perusing the middle aisle as you do, because I only go to the very best shops obviously, and I came across this. For £2 you get a set of felt pad sets, and I actually bought 2. So they're just essentially little stickers to put on the bottom of your models or what have you, to save scratching up the sides. But the good thing is it also came with just a complete sheet of this sort of furry back. It's about I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 mil thick. But what I thought would be good for, on these bases, the problem is most of the time you end up hollowing them out and they don't exactly look particularly nice from the bottom. So this stuff, it's sticky back, which is very handy, paper on the back. So all I'm going to do is draw a circle around the bottom of the base, peel off the sheet, stick it on the bottom, and we should have a much nicer, more professional look to the end of it. So I thought, yeah, a nice little cheat there. As I say, Lidl, middle aisle, can't ever go wrong. And here is the base all finished. I put that felt, I say, on the bottom. I think that looks quite good. Hides up all those horrible holes. As you can see of the logo, I tried to do like a slight sort of variation on the red and the gold on the logo there by sort of adding dabs of orange and silver and whatnot. I think it looks not too bad. Now I can't glue all the pieces on yet until the model is actually put on first, so I have to actually attach the Mega Red's body onto it because these things slightly cover over, but I'll just put a couple on temporarily so you get the idea. So it's just the head now that we need to finish off to get the model fully completed. So this is where we were from the last stages. So obviously I followed the same patterns with I did with the red and the skin colour and the metal there. So now what I'm going to do is start blocking in some of these other colours. So I'm going to put in black for the eyes. I'm going to put in the teeth with a mix of Rakarth flesh and a bit of white, just to lighten that colour down a little bit. And then I'm going to do yellow Avalon Sunset over all of the hair. So with those paints on, the face is looking a lot different now. Next I'm going to put in the red eyeballs for his eyes. I've looked up his Wikipedia profile and apparently his eyes are red and black. Then I'm going to throw a wash over the hair because whilst it is quite comic accurate how bright it is, it's way too bright for the model. So I'm going to throw a sepia wash over that to darken it down a little bit. Then of course I'm also going to throw a wash over the teeth. Need to do that symbol on his forehead as well. I'll probably do that silver. And then I'll probably do either a dry brush or edge highlights over the hair once that wash has been dried. And then I think we're probably almost done. And there he is with all those paints applied. So I finished off the eyes, did red, slight white dot there. Still not convinced by the hair. I've lightened it up a little bit, but I think I used the wrong yellow to start with, but it will do. It'll do. So yeah, that's all finished now. So now just to glue it all into place, and we'll call this model done. Here we are with the final reveal of the finished model. So it's a really nice model. It's quite an impressive piece. Those tentacles, because they are a little bit over the top, you get a kind of a different look with him depending which side you look at it at, if that makes sense. Those tentacles are good and bad though. Sort of the only issues that you have is the tentacles are so many pieces that ultimately they're going to be a problem to put together, because obviously when you do 3D printing, each part ever so slightly warps by a degree or two. So when you that's compounded by the amount of pieces you have to put together. Now the problem is with these pieces is they connect in 2 points, one coming out of his hand and then across out of his back. So they have to try and line up, or else the model isn't going to work. But the problem you got is that when you get to one end, with the best will in the world, you're going to have a little bit of gaps. So we've got one here, which isn't so bad, I suppose. But I've got a worse one. Trying to find where it is now. Perhaps it's not as bad as I remembered. We've got one sort of here. If I can focus in. So yeah, I suppose it's not terrible. I think obviously other people might do a better job than me, frankly. But yeah, I mean, on the whole, apart from that, the model was fairly easy to put together. I don't think you're going to struggle too much. I think you will have to build it in parts like I did to make your life easy, because there's no way you're going to be able to paint in around all these tentacles all over the show, and the base itself. So you will have to do it in parts. I think the sculpt itself is fantastic. I think the face is really, really good. That is definitely a Mega Red. There's no that is classic Jim Lee styling, without a doubt. What I like about the statue is it's fairly easy to paint using dry brushing method, because there is so much texture across the model. So you can see all the shadows and lights and darks that I did, and I did all of this with brush. So there's no airbrush used, and it's even the same with the skin. You know, I've got in the different shades there, with the blue and the white, and again that was all just inks and dry brush. So yeah, quite pleased with how it came out. Quite pleased with the skin. I wasn't too sure about that. I think having that blue tint really does make the difference. If it was just white, or I was going to go white and grey, but no, I think white and blue is the way to go. Pleased with the logo. I think, as I say, doing a more simplistic colour on the base, you know, if you wanted to, you could really go in and do all the detail, paint in the gun and the sword there and all the stars, different colours and that. But I think for me that would just be a bit overkill. I think keeping it simple is the way to go. Okay, so as always, going to find this guy a place to live, and today is going to be a very special one. If you're a fan of original artwork, stay tuned. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to apologise in advance for the glare, but I can't really avoid that, unfortunately. So anyway, this is where he's going to go. He's going to make his way into my collection room, and behind him is some original artwork of a Mega Red. So he's actually from the 95 Fleer trading card set, and it's quite a famous image. If you type in a Mega Red online, I think it's one of the first images that comes up for him, and I'm lucky enough to actually own the original artwork here. So there we go. He's going to sit in front of that painting, and I think the two look fantastic together. So, and just next to him, I have some Doctor Doom original artwork. Now currently I've got a Fantastic Four model in front, but I suppose really I should see if I can get a Doctor Doom instead. Okay, well thank you very much for watching. That'll just about do it. Hope you enjoyed that, and stick around and I'll do another one in the very near future. Cheers.